G'day divers and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to take you to one of the most famous historical wrecks in Australia, certainly in Victoria, the Loch Ard Wreck. Ever since tragedy struck in 1878, the story of Tom Pearce saving the 18-year-old Eva Carmichael, dragging her out of the surf and up onto the beach after she'd lost her entire family, has captured the hearts and the souls of all Australians. If you don't know about the story of the Loch Ard, I implore you, please look into it. It's an amazing story. You can visit the Flagstaff Museum in Warrnambool. It has a lot of the artifacts and all the story about that fateful night. But until then, enjoy this video. I'm going to tell you where it is, how to get to it, the sort of conditions you need to dive, and the sort of dive depths and equipment that you need. If you stay around till the end, I'll go through the equipment I used to film it and the settings I used if that interests you as well.
The only thing better than getting to dive the Loch Ard is getting to Loch Ard Gorge and finding out that the access is closed from the top. So everybody else is stuck on the cliffs and we get to spend lunch on our own beach. I can guarantee it doesn't happen very often here.
Today we're going to be visiting one of the most famous wrecks in Australia, the Loch Ard Wreck. It's located along the Great Ocean Road in Victoria. We launched our boats from Boat Bay, but then it's about a 24.5 kilometre trip. The Loch Ard Wreck is one of Victoria's most famous and tragic wrecks. If you're not sure about the story of the Loch Ard Wreck, the best thing to do before you dive this site is visit the Flagstaff Hill Maritime Museum in Warrnambool. I'll leave a link in the description for the Flagstaff Hill Maritime Museum. Definitely worth visiting that before you dive the wreck. This is a historic wreck. It's not one of those purpose-built wrecks where you're going to swim through decks and see all the ship in its glory. What you're going to see is a wreck that's been laying there since 1878. Now you really have two options to launch for here. You can either launch at Port Campbell, which isn't the easiest because you need to use the crane, or launch from Boat Bay. But it's a good 24 kilometre trip, one way, and it needs to be on a particularly good day. On this day I was diving with the Warrnambool Sub-Aqua Club, and this particular dive was only thought about and planned 48 hours out because there's very few days of the year where the weather is good enough to dive this site. When it comes to historic wrecks, they're normally a reason why they are where they are, which means they're in hard places to get to because they normally need very, very good conditions to dive. And this one is no exception. You're going to need a swell well and truly under 1.5 metres, and that can often be hard to predict out in the southwest. The chances of you just booking a weekend in a month's time and being able to get to this wreck are very slim. You need to get some local knowledge and you need to be watching the weather and planning for a last minute trip to get here. Otherwise it's very unlikely you're ever going to encounter the conditions to be able to dive. The Loch Ard Wreck was launched in Scotland in 1873. She was a 3-mast steel clipper with a length of 80.1 metres and a beam of 11.7 metres. On the 1st of March 1878 she left Gravesend, Kent, bound for Melbourne. On board were a total of 54 people including crew and passengers. Bad weather and heavy fog was encountered as they sailed along the Victorian coast towards Melbourne, and in the early hours of the 1st of June 1878 she hit Mutton Bird Island, sinking within 10 to 15 minutes. Sadly, out of the 54 people on board, there was only 2 survivors who were lucky enough to wash up in the Loch Ard Gorge where we enjoyed lunch. This dive site's around the 22 to 24 metre mark, with the shallowest part being around 15. So it's certainly a recreational dive as far as depth. The only thing is time. So for instance, I was on a fully closed rebreather and so was my buddy, and we only came up because he was getting cold because he was wearing a wetsuit. We did a 76-minute dive and I was nowhere near deco, even though we'd spent pretty much the whole dive at 20 metres plus, and we'd used about a quarter of a tank of our gas. There were 2 other people in the boat who were diving recreationally, and to give you an idea, they did a 42-minute dive and had to do 3 minutes of deco, and that was pretty much their tank exhausted as well. That's one of the beautiful advantages of diving on the rebreather, is the fact that I don't have to worry about my no decompression limit at these sorts of depths, and I don't need to worry about my gas consumption, within reason of course. The dive's going to end when you get cold or your batteries get flat, not because of gas consumption and not because of decompression. You've still got the bow. You can see Gary showing me the bow and showing me the leading edge of the cutting edge. There was a lot of lead shot, and in this shot you can see all the lead shot lying on the bottom. These are the bollards they used to tie the ships up with. And normally, I think because bollards are such large steel items, they often survive the best off wrecks. There's plenty of marine life on the wreck, big schools of sweep that just seem to follow you around. This is all a marine park, so there's also no fishing or taking of any marine life here. There were some quite large schools of fish on the wreck, but I was mainly interested in the wreck, so I didn't get a lot of shots of them. One of the many nice things about rebreathers is the no bubbles, so apart from the fish being really close to you, it's very handy when you go inside things like wrecks and caves, because if we were in here on open circuit, all our bubbles would be going up and hitting the wreck, and all the stuff would start dropping down on your head, and it can be hard enough in these sorts of sites to keep the visibility good as it is, but having a rebreather certainly helps. Certainly when I'm filming behind Gary, if he had open circuit on, I'd have scatter all through my shots by this point, just from all the bits and pieces dropping off the ceiling. You can see there we went underneath the hull of the ship. We're at probably 23 meters, 22 meters. There's still quite a bit of steel and structure left underneath the wreck. Makes for an interesting part to have a look around. There was a bunch of lead that it was carrying, and you can still see the big items of lead. And here's Gary explaining to me that these are bits of lead still down there. As you can see with my rebreather, I don't have any bubbles. The Warrnambool Sub-Aqua Club is an active club, and if you're interested in joining or coming along sometime, please visit our Facebook page. We're always looking for new members. Don't let the pictures of technical diving put you off. We are more than keen to have new divers. There's a range of experience in the club. The thing I love most about this wreck is the story behind it, and the fact that you're now on a wreck it gets pummeled by the weather constantly, and has done for almost 150 years. And it's amazing that you can turn up and still find bits and pieces that were on that wreck from that fateful night. We found quite a few mosaic tiles on this one. There was one that was pretty much intact. Obviously now anything that you see down there you can't take, but it's amazing how much stuff is there and how it changes each time you go there. It's also such a spectacular dive to get to, and so hard to get to. Even though I live in the southwest, I could count on one hand how many times I get here. So it's one of those places where you just need to wait. If you see that the weather's going to be amazing, then do whatever you can to get out of work so you can head down to this wreck. Well, I hope you liked the video of the Loch Ard Wreck. If you've got any questions, please add a comment and I'll try and answer them all. As far as the equipment I used a GoPro Hero 11 with a dual tray that I got off eBay. I did have the AOI wide-angled lens on there, and I used a couple of cheap $85 eBay lights. They're called QH18s, and you'll find them online. Lots of different suppliers from China will supply a similar light. They all look like these. They are cheap, and you get what you pay for, but they do the job, and it's an action camera after all. As for the settings, I filmed the whole thing in 5K 60 and then I put it at half speed in post. All the white balancing was on auto and it was all done underwater. I did no color correction in post whatsoever. If you want to know more about joining the Warrnambool Sub-Aqua Club, please have a look on our Facebook page. If you've got any other questions at all, please put them in the comments. Until next time, keep blowing bubbles and don't forget, the deeper you go, the further you get away from all those idiots.